Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 240 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, you guessed it, jaysfromthecouch.com. We're so glad you're tuning in for another episode with us. We've got a great one. We'll be joined by Shi Davidi here in a moment. Just want to let you know, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, we love it. Thank you so much. We're trying this out, and it seems to be going really well. We really appreciate all the positive feedback and your comments and questions during the show. Greatly appreciated. You can always catch us every week here, 7 p.m. Eastern time, as we go live. And don't forget, if you missed the show, of course, you can find the audio version of our podcast, whether it's on Apple or Google or wherever you find a podcast, you will find Jays from the Couch Radio. All right, I'm your host, as always, Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Like I said, we've got a great episode for you. We've got Shi Davidi waiting in our green room. He's relaxing, waiting, and a couple of weeks ago we told Keegan it wasn't an open bar, but we opened it up for Shi. So momentarily I'll bring him in here. We're going to get his thoughts on a whole bunch of Blue Jays stuff, and maybe even take your questions as they're coming in live on Facebook or YouTube, excuse me. Anyway, without further ado, the one, the only, you know him, you love him, Shi Davidi. Welcome, sir.
Thanks. Nice to imagine an open bar, or just any kind of bar at this point. Being able to gather at one of those, it's a nice, pleasant thought on this pleasant Sunday.
I hear you. So listen, I do want to ask you, and when I introduce somebody like yourself, baseball insider Shi Davidi of Sportsnet fame, my question first, right off the bat, Shi, is how does one become a baseball insider?
It's funny. I know that that's a term and that's sort of the business. I like to just think of myself as a good old-fashioned baseball journalist. But I went to school for journalism at Ryerson, and sadly, in my teenage years, I came to the realization that I was not going to be a professional baseball player, and this was clearly the best alternative to it. And I ended up just focusing on that. And it's kind of funny that my career's taken a few different turns. I did an internship in international news at the Jerusalem Post while I was in school. Just out of school, I actually finished second for a writing job at the Hockey News, which obviously would have taken my career in a vastly different direction. I worked for a while in international news at Japan Times in Tokyo. And then I came back to the Canadian Press, where I started off as a generalist in sports and eventually found my way into baseball, which is one of my passions. So, there's no singular method, and certainly there are a lot more different pathways into the industry now than there were when I was entering it. I was just I graduated just into the beginning of the internet revolution and saw how that changed the industry. There are just a ton of different pathways into it right now.
Right, for sure. And I think, imagine, heading along those pathways allows you to establish those connections and the whatnots that allow you to get the inside scoop, as opposed to somebody like me who just does this from his couch, right? So
yeah, I mean it's all about sort of relationships and developing trusts and trying to figure out the people who know what's up, and trying to bounce things off them, and it's a fun game. I think it's for baseball fans like us, anybody who's passionate about it, right? Like, you're just curious and you love the game. And so, I get to ask the people doing it the questions that I've always wondered. And that to me is one of the coolest parts of the job.
So speaking of the job, how has COVID impacted covering the game of baseball? You can't do the on-field interviews, the clubhouse, none of it. So from your perspective, how has that changed?
Well, I think our beat here in Toronto got impacted the most out of anybody in baseball because, except for Rob Longley, who spent a couple months in Buffalo on his own, nobody was there. We weren't actually at the ballpark. And this is the first year. I mean, I don't remember, I would have been like a little kid the last time I didn't actually see a live regular season game.
Right.
And so I think that part of it was really difficult. But then, just the proximity and the way the access to everybody was controlled meant it was virtually impossible unless you went outside team channels to have one-on-one conversations with people, which is something I was able to do a handful of times, but it's really something that you got to balance when you're managing relationships. Like, these guys are already dealing with enough. You don't want to put that on top of them. So the information was really controlled in a tight way by the team. The access to people, the team were right at the spigot and deciding how much to open or close it at any given time. And so when you can't have those private conversations, just, be able to see a guy, and it's not even, a formal interview, but you say, hey, that at bat last night, what did you see on that curveball or something like that? Or how did that look to you? Or how did your swing feel on this? Those are sort of the insights that you build up, and you develop a well of knowledge that you can draw from. And you just weren't able to do that. So a lot of times, I think, for myself and some of my colleagues, we were drawing upon what we've known in the past, and then trying to glean whatever we could along the way.
Right. Now, you mentioned the control of information. The Blue Jays couldn't have been any different than any other Major League Baseball team in that sense, right?
No, and that was really up to everybody. I think there was amongst teams different levels of facilitating one-on-ones, but I think the Blue Jays, just talking to some of my colleagues around the game, I think they were right on par doing pretty much what most other teams were doing. And some teams had different structures. Like the Blue Jays had a very formalized setting where, everybody, you'd put your hand up in the Zoom call, and, the moderator would eventually go down to it. Some teams just had an open conversation where everybody could just jump in on top of each other. Other teams were very rigid, and they had a specific structure, and everybody could ask only one question. So, from my perspective, I thought the Blue Jays did a very nice job with us, probably about as good as you can do. But certainly would have liked to have seen a few more yeses to one-on-one requests.
Right. And anybody who over the last 6-9 months who's participated in Zoom calls can appreciate just the difficulty that they entail. Now, Shi, listen, something that just came up like a couple of days ago, Rogers Center teardown. This has impacted my family. My wife's grandfather was his company did the electric work.
Oh, wow.
In Skydome. So, they're all like, what? Anyway, and I guess up in the concourse, they have that giant mural with the handwritten names on there. And, they're all like, can we get his name, please? Anyway, so, yeah, if you could make that happen, Shi, I know my family would deeply appreciate it.
I'll get in there with my hammer and chisel next time I'm in the building.
Excellent. But in all, on a serious note, this is kind of big news.
Well, I mean, if this actually happens, and look, I think the fact that this leak, like, this was designed to move some people in some way, shape, or form, right? Otherwise, this has by and large been out there to a degree that the Blue Jays were looking to do some sort of larger scale sports anchored development, but I think what was new about this was, one, I don't think that it had ever been this public and this definitive that it's tearing down the dome as opposed to renovating it and building an entirely new stadium. And I think that's the piece that's intriguing. And then, this is essentially sat dormant for about a year. If you look back to some of the lobbying records, there hasn't been a lot happening on that front. But what we don't know is just, and this is where I assume there's been some movement, was on the Rogers Brookfield end of things, in trying to sort of formalize their plan, finalize what they want to take to the various levels of government whose approvals will be needed. So I'm wondering if this is essentially the first step in kickstarting the coming process. But the fact that it's out there is very significant. And I think, if you're a baseball fan, and the thought of a baseball-only stadium is terrific here in the city. I personally am a bit more of a fan of the dome than I think most. But I certainly understand why we're transitioning and talking about this, because as we all know, the whole stadium game changed a couple of years after Skydome opened,
Right.
with Camden Yards, and everybody's vision of what a ballpark looks like is not what the Dome is.
That is 100% true. Where does the money come from, Shai?
I think this is going. I mean, if it's going to happen, it's got to all happen through the private sector, and this is where I think Edward Rogers and Rogers itself comes in. But I don't think that this is a this is a profit play ultimately, right? There's certainly an element of civic creating something for the city that is lasting. And I think there's just a lot of interests that converge, right? The city has been looking forever to try and develop the rail deck park, but hasn't been able to do that. Rogers has an opportunity to create a commercial retail space alongside the rail deck park, redevelop the Dome. I think one part of the project would help finance some of the other parts of the project. You put all this together, it's a really a remarkable piece of thinking. It's really a great vision for the city if you can make it work. And then ideally the rail deck park eventually gets built out, and then you've got this incredible space for the city, not just for sports fans, but you've got something for everybody to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
That part of it is really amazing.
Right. And now we're getting into the stuff that everybody wants to know about, Shai. The questions are coming in on YouTube and on Facebook. And before I throw those at you, this year has been exceptional in the sense that in previous years, the Blue Jays have been linked to people, whether it's to pump the value of somebody or whatever, the games that are played. But this year's is different, and yet Toronto is still linked to everybody. So I guess the question is, of all those names that are out there, the JT Realmuto, the George Springer, the Trevor, all of them, is there any truth to any of them? And if so, which ones have the potential of becoming a reality here?
Well, there's a legitimate engagement this year with that level of free agent, whereas in years past it was really sort of tire kicking, trying to see where the market's at on things. The agents usually using the Blue Jays, but I mean, in this case, like the Blue Jays are a legitimate destination, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, Blue Jays have money to spend. Not every team has money to spend. Two, the Blue Jays have the motivation to do it because they believe their core is at a point where you need to augment. And, I know people poo-poo the accomplishment of this past season because of 60 games, yada, yada. But this is a group that needs to advance, right? They need to start moving from just areas of potential to adding some real dudes to support the rest of the group. So I think that's why things are different this offseason. Mm-hmm. As to who they're going to get, look, I think they're legitimately on LeMahieu. I think they're legitimately on Springer, legitimately on Brantley. It's pretty quiet around Realmuto, but I think that's genuine too. Who are they going to get? That I don't know. Everyone I speak to seems convinced that they're going to get somebody. Some people think they may get more than that. And I think that part of that is just market realities, that they have chairs and not every team has chair right now. And I think that's one of the reasons for that. So certainly a lot of intrigue this offseason in a way that other previous off seasons have not had.
Exactly. And that's what makes it exciting. And yet for some people, a little frustrating, right? Because it's, now you're hearing and they're in the back of your head when you hear it, you're like, well, it could be true. Mm-hmm. But realistically, is it? So and Shai, now the questions are coming in here, and I'm just gonna pop it up here for you. George Springer, Toronto bound, and you mentioned. So I wonder if you could clarify for me when we hear that the talks are beyond just talks with George Springer. Could you maybe clarify that?
Well, I think that there's the initial, hey, we're interested, what do you got? And then you can have sort of a more advanced conversations where, it's like, this is what we're about. This is our plan, meeting with different people in the organization, things of that nature, where it's really a more substantial, what would this partnership potentially look like? Just from, relationships and, day-to-day working standpoint. And my understanding is some of that is what's taking place now. Now, are they actually talking numbers? That I don't know. But this is not just, hey, we're interested, keep us posted on where things are going. This is it's a much more active and alive discussion. And, does that lead to anything? I don't know. I do think the New York Mets are going to be a factor in everybody's deliberations. But, the Blue Jays do have Dave Hudgens on their coaching staff. Hudgens was part of Houston's coaching staff when George Springer transitioned from the minors to the majors. So maybe that's a help. There's some comfort there. And we'll see where it goes.
Right. So why, though? Here's the question that I need to know is, and this is for me personally, why are they this deep, for lack of a better term, in George Springer talks? I wouldn't have guessed that center field would have been such a priority, in particular when you look at the cost that it would take to obtain George Springer and how much better that the team is. I wouldn't have guessed that this would be something that they would actually pursue. So my question to you is why?
Well, I mean, one, pretty good player, right?
Yeah.
He's very impactful. He's maybe not a true elite center fielder, but he's probably a better defensive center fielder than Randall Grichuk. I think that you get an upgrade there. It's a dynamic player for your lineup. He's giving you a lot more offensive potential. And I think at this point, you imagine that you put him atop a lineup with Kevin Biggio. Maybe you move Bo Bichette down a little bit lower into a production spot, sort of a table setting spot. You can do a lot of different things with that. And I think what the Blue Jays have done this offseason, in part, is just open every opportunity, every pathway possible, right? Because what if I've heard DJ LeMahieu described as the perfect fit. And I think that in the ideal world, he's one of the guys they get. But so let's say LeMahieu goes back to New York. Realmuto ends up with the Mets or the Phillies. And some of the other pieces that you're after all fall apart. Well, Springer's the best guy out there, and Springer's giving you impact. And they want impact. They don't want complementary pieces, right? Like they want to do they like Colton Wong. I don't think he's their number one target, but I think they'd like to do better than, say, the Colton Wongs of the world, the Jackie Bradley Juniors in the world, if they can. So, because they have a lot of versatility, because they can play around with their roster in a number of different ways, I think that you just get the best player you can get. And if it happens to be Springer, I mean, who's going to be upset about that?
Right. And that's fair. So then, how likely is a trade for Francisco Lindor then? Jim Bowden says the cost is stupid high. Is that a pipe dream? Is there any point in anybody even getting excited about that?
Well, I mean, my understanding, the way it was put to me, is that the Blue Jays would be unlikely to pay a high price for him in trade if there wasn't either a negotiating window where they had a pretty good idea of what it would take to sign him, or at least the opportunity to legitimately discuss an extension with him, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not gonna deplete their farm system for 1 year of Francisco Lindor, which it wouldn't make sense for them at this point with where they're at. So that's kind of where I would peg it. We'll see where those discussions go. We'll see how that market develops. The Boston Red Sox ended up with one suitor for Mookie Betts last year, and it was the Dodgers. And maybe something similar plays out with Lindor this year.
Mm-hmm. Right. Fair enough. Okay. So before I get into these viewer questions here, can you give me a prediction for December? Right. Because we're hearing all of this stuff, the Blue Jays could jump the market and all of this. And it feels to some people that it's still, slow if that's the case. So is anything going to happen in December, Shi?
I would hope so. I would think so. But this is, as everybody knows, and these are weird times. And I wonder if there's a school where, baseball teams are, let's see if we can bleed out players and make them uncomfortable and use the deadline or the lack of deadlines to, see if we can drive down prices a bit more than usual. I can see that playing out, and I can see some teams. I think the Blue Jays are trying to be one of those, to zag while everybody's zigging, and seeing if they can use that as a bit of an opportunity. So, we've seen very little happen in terms of actual signings to this point.
Yeah.
So, at some point that's got to change. And I just don't know whether what the domino needs to be, what the domino needs to be to get everything started. Maybe it's the Mets making their first move and establishing a bit of a market, because I think some people are waiting for the Mets to do that. But the business is weird, man. Like, it could be just one player deciding to say, you know what, I'm good with this. Let's do it.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, if you don't mind, Shai, just a couple more minutes here. We've got some viewer questions here. This one came in from YouTube. What was your favorite Blue Jays deal to report?
Ooh, favorite. I think I kind of liked the Troy Tulowitzki trade, because it was I should have been asleep. I had come home from Seattle on a red-eye flight, and I'd stayed up all day to get my clock reset. And I was like fried. And then like midnight happened, and I started hearing about it. And then I was up till like 4 a.m. So that one was kind of fun. But I think what was a little bit more enjoyable was David Price, because David Price made people so happy.
It did.
Right? There was just that's what I remember so much from 2015. It's just this euphoric joy that everybody had, and everybody being so pumped and such a good mood about things. That was really cool. Like, as much as baseball is great no matter what, but when like people are super pumped like that and super excited, that's awesome. And so I think probably David Price, just because of the joy.
Right, fair enough. And you're not wrong, by the way. Could the Jays still play at Buffalo when Buffalo is on the road next season? And this is a legitimate question with regard to where the Blue Jays are going to play, right? The Raptors can't play in Toronto. Obviously, their season starts much sooner. But how do you see this playing out for next season?
So from the conversations I've had, it doesn't seem like Buffalo, they're expecting or behaving as if Buffalo is going to be an option for them. And I'm not sure that they want to. The way somebody put it to me recently is like, Buffalo was great for what it was, but I'm not sure that we could have done that over 162 games. So that's some of the thinking there. I think that a couple of options, the likeliest options, try to pair up with a major league team the way that they tried to do with Pittsburgh before that got shot down. I would expect them to explore that avenue again. I got a coolish reaction to this, but I still think that there's something to this where maybe they end up in Dunedin so they can sell a few tickets at least and create some revenue that way. I expect Florida to continue to be among the states not particularly treating COVID-19 very seriously. I could see that sort of scenario playing out as well. But they're very much are hoping that they'll play at least the majority of this season, if not the entire season, in Toronto. And I think a lot obviously hinges on vaccine rollout and how that plays out.
Yeah, of course. Last question for you here, Shai. I hope you're a movie buff. What's your favorite MCU movie, the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
So I love Spider-Man. If some of you guys may see, I have a Spider-Man poster up that side, but I also am a Star Wars nerd. And so I'm going to have to say, since now Lucasfilm is part of sort of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I guess they're all under Disney or whatever, I'd go Star Wars. But if you're going to eliminate Star Wars, then I'm going to go Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, Shai. Listen, I was having such a good time until you went with Spider-Man. I can't get on board with he's just too young in my mind.
I've always loved the comic book Spider-Man. I think Peter Parker. I love the inner conflict within Peter Parker. just the constant struggling with the power of being a superhero, and then struggling with the daily realities of his life, of his personal life. For some reason, that resonated with me. So that's why I'm a big Spidey guy.
Well, of course, and that makes a lot of sense. Of course, what resonates with me is Thor from Endgame because that's what I looked like during my lockdown on COVID. So, anyway, Shi, thank you so much. I appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us tonight. And all the best. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and same to you and to everyone here who's watching. Hopefully we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. We'll be back to normal and have some actual baseball in the city this spring and summer.
That'd be great. Awesome. Shi, thank you so much and take care.
Stay safe. See ya.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Sportsnet Shi Davidi. Always a great chat. He wrote, I don't know if any of you will remember, but the 2019 Guide to the Toronto Blue Jays, Shi wrote our foreword, and it was exceptional, as you can imagine. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and everywhere else. I really appreciate it. We're getting lots of great feedback and interaction and engagement on our shows. So thank you so much to everybody. Remember, the audio version of our weekly podcast on Google, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, everywhere you find podcasts, you'll find Jays from the Couch Radio. Check us out, JaysFromTheCouch.com. Follow us on Twitter at JaysFromCouch. So for Shi Davidi, for all of us here at Jays from the Couch, this is Sean Doyle, hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.